When Pixar finally released the trailer for Inside Out 2, they not only answered a bunch of questions that fans had about the movie, but also created a whole new mystery about the plot. I'm talking about the one character who seemed to be missing toward the climactic points in the trailer, even though she was one of the main focal points of the first movie. In the trailer, when they're shown locked up, all 5 of Riley's core emotions are present, but then, when the same core emotions are floating toward destruction, there are only 4. So I have to ask, where did sadness disappear to? Now let's talk about the elephant in the room here before we continue, or should I say the emotions in the jar. One of the biggest twists fans get to see in the Inside Out 2 trailer is the moment where anxiety officially takes over the command center, bringing a whole new meaning to the phrase bottling up your emotions. At the beginning of the trailer, we see anxiety and joy clashing over what's best for Riley, especially when a new friend asks Riley to sit with her at lunch. While Joy seemed confident that she knew the proper way to respond, anxiety clearly wanted to step in just to make sure that things went perfectly. Well, Joy ends up causing Riley to embarrass herself, leading to a series of scenes that basically show anxiety's takeover of Riley's mind. Anxiety then explains to the core 5 emotions that she believes Riley needs more sophisticated emotions to take care of her. This is when the trailer plot twists, as Joy and the other original emotions are surprised by a massive bear hug from behind. Only it's not exactly the type of hug you would want, because it turns out this was anxiety's way of using embarrassment and his massive size to subdue the core 5 emotions. This leads Joy to yell that they can't just bottle them up, before flashing to a scene where all 5 of Riley's original emotions are trapped in a single jar with a black lid that seems sealed. This is funny, dark, and intriguing all at the same time. 1. What a great visual joke about suppressed or bottled up emotions. 2. It's awful to think that anxiety's solution to every problem is to just lock away any emotion that might be the cause. However, that's kind of accurate to what anxiety actually feels like in real life, isn't it? And 3. It's really interesting because this tells us that the plot of Inside Out 2 is likely going to involve the core 5 emotions figuring out how to overcome these new, more complex feelings that are taking over Riley's mind. But here's the thing. In the scene that shows all of the emotions who have been bottled up, all 5 of the characters from the first movie were there. So how do you explain sadness being with the core 5 emotions in the bottle when she's clearly not with them in the scenes that are presumably set after they all escape? You see, toward the end of the trailer, there are a few scenes that show Joy and the other original emotions traversing Riley's psyche outside of the command center. Only the group is missing one key emotion: sadness. As I mentioned though, sadness was with Joy, anger, fear, and disgust as the group was rounded up by embarrassment and shoved into the jar. This means that somewhere between the group's great jar escape and their journey through Riley's inner mind, sadness is somehow separated from the group. Interestingly enough though, we do know that sadness was with the group at least for a little while after they escaped from their prison. You can see that in the trailer around the 2-minute mark, where fans see the core 5 emotions as Joy is rushing them all to get moving. This scene presumably takes place after the group figures out how to escape from the jar that anxiety had forced them into, and shows that, at first, all of the emotions, including sadness, were together. As the trailer continues though, that changes. There's a scene where Pixar shows Joy, along with anger, disgust, and fear, floating down a river toward a waterfall of sorts that's surrounded by Riley's crumbling mindset. But sadness isn't with them. And then again, at the sarcasm, as Joy is yelling across to the construction workers, Pixar gives us a good look at the group. But they are one emotion short. So where did sadness go after the core emotions escaped from the jar? Well, according to this theory, sadness isn't shown at the end of the trailer because she's off progressing the plot of the movie while searching for embarrassment. Now, this is also just a theory, but I think sadness might have a bit of a crush on embarrassment. When they first introduced the big pink Goliath in the trailer, while the rest of the core 5 emotions seemed almost intimidated by him, sadness was the only one to step forward at first. With a very rare smile on her face, sadness calmly asked, "What's your name, big fella?" as she stepped toward the new emotion. Even though their interaction was brief and somewhat indirect, there's actually a lot that we can take away from it. For starters, when anxiety first revealed herself in the trailer, you'll notice that sadness looked startled and actually hid behind Joy. Well, her reaction was clearly different when embarrassment popped into the command center. On top of that, sadness's big smile and the starry-eyed look that she gave embarrassment as she stepped forward says it all. Sadness almost definitely has a thing for embarrassment, and that will likely play a big part in the plot of Inside Out 2. But that doesn't explain where sadness was during those final few scenes in the trailer when the core emotions were wandering around Riley's headspace, and that might have to do with the very emotion that she seemed so affectionate toward. You see, Pixar made it clear that embarrassment is going to constantly be hiding his face, or sometimes even his entire body, from everyone around because that's in the nature of the emotion. In fact, it sort of seems like embarrassment might play a massive role in Riley's life throughout the second movie, which is why one of the bigger fan theories is that Riley is going to become so overwhelmed by embarrassment that it forces anxiety to take over. This would be the point where she forces embarrassment to bottle up the core 5 emotions. Here's the thing though, according to this theory, embarrassment felt so, well, embarrassed by what happened that he decides to run away. We all know from the first movie what happens to Riley when her command center lacks specific emotions, meaning just like when sadness and joy left in the first movie. Riley's world might start to spiral if embarrassment runs away. This is where sadness comes into play, at least according to this theory. As I mentioned before, it seems like sadness might have a crush on and possibly even form a strong bond with embarrassment during the movie. This could mean that when the core 5 emotions manage to escape from their jar-shaped prison and sadness hears about embarrassment running off, she decides to go out and look for him. This would not only explain why she wasn't with the rest of the group as they faced what seemed like pure danger as they floated down the river or when they sought help at the Sarcasm. Embarrassment disappearing from Riley's command center might also explain why her inner world seems to fall apart toward the end of the trailer. This may be quite similar to how the personality islands began to fall apart in the first movie as joy and sadness went searching for Riley's core memories. As for why the other 4 core emotions didn't follow after sadness, again, the answer is pretty simple. If this theory is true, joy and the other emotions would likely have a sort of tunnel vision where they would only really be focused on getting back to the command center to save Riley from anxiety. In other words, they simply wouldn't have time to save an emotion like embarrassment, which actually begs another question. If this theory is true and sadness is away from her friends because she was out looking for embarrassment, how could she possibly hope to bring him back on her own? Honestly, it might have to do with the same lesson that sadness and joy had to learn in the first Inside Out movie. If you remember, the entire premise of the first movie was that every emotion served an important purpose and that there was always room for everyone in the command center. However, the last part was more of a lesson that only sadness and joy really had to learn. Throughout their journey together, Joy had to learn to be more accepting of sadness, even if she appears to affect Riley negatively. Joy had to learn that sadness is still an important emotion in Riley's psyche and that there was room for sadness in the command center despite what Joy might think. Well, since both sadness and joy were able to learn this lesson in the first movie, there's almost no one better to try to teach the new emotions the same lesson in the sequel. According to this theory, sadness's ultimate goal, if she goes searching for embarrassment, might be to teach the big fella that he belongs in the command center, even if his emotions directly clash with the others. The entire point of the command center is for the emotions to work together to help Riley navigate the world around her. And as she grows up, she'll need more complex emotions to help her out. That doesn't mean she won't need her original core 5 though, which is why joy, sadness, and the rest of the bunch are going to have to teach these new emotions that they all belong, starting with sadness going out of her way to find embarrassment. Now remember, this is only a theory. The only way to know what the actual plot for Inside Out 2 will be is to wait for the movie to release in June. I'm curious to hear what you think about this theory though. Is sadness going to separate herself from the other core emotions to go out and search for embarrassment? Be sure to let me know in the comments below.